So on the phone, Tony, who's an attorney. Today, a Clark County grand jury has indicted Alvin Kamara and 3 accomplices on conspiracy to commit battery and battery resulting in substantial bodily harm.
At a minimum, he's going to be trying to plead out. I think he ends up getting anywhere from 2 to 6 games, and I think it gets done before the season starts.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
The court date will be set for March 2nd. Indictment meaning that, like, similar to the Deshaun Watson situation, correct me if I'm wrong, but so everybody watching knows, indictment mainly means that the DA, like in a criminal situation, tries to determine whether there's enough evidence to move forward so they don't waste any time or resources on going after something that may not end in a positive result. So and they always say you can indict a ham sandwich, yet Deshaun Watson in all 23 cases never was indicted on any of the criminal stuff. So for Alvin Kamara to be indicted, they clearly believe there's enough criminal evidence to proceed to court and try and go after Alvin Kamara. So explain to me what all this means, what you expect to happen, and then I'll ask you follow-up questions.
Yeah, sure, buddy. First of all, I do civil law. I don't really do a lot of criminal. I remember a reasonable amount of criminal law from law school. The issue of indictment versus complaint is fairly simple. In most states, there are 2 different ways that a criminal matter can be put before a court. One is on a complaint alone, which generally can be any officer of the local government. And secondly is on an indictment. An indictment means that the local prosecuting attorney has gone to a group of jurors, they're generally called grand jurors, and presented the evidence and said to those grand jurors, is there enough here for us to reasonably believe that we could win a conviction if we brought a criminal case to trial? And that means that at least, it varies by state now that I think about it, but I would guess that at least 90% of the grand jurors voted positively. I think in most states it's 90%. And at that point, the person is considered indicted. The indictment generally is presented to the grand jurors in the form of a complaint, and they read through that, and then the local prosecuting attorney presents the evidence, and they vote. It's comparatively simple. That process, any of the testimony that's given is secret. Now, the grand jurors can later talk about what happened, but the testimony by the witnesses, they're held to a privilege. They're not allowed to talk about their testimony outside of the presence of the grand jury. What it means in this case is that, a number of local citizens looked at the evidence against Mr. Kamara and decided that there was enough there to indict him on both battery and conspiracy to commit battery. As you recall, the video came out, 5 months ago. I don't really remember exactly when. But from what I remember of that video, I thought it was pretty compelling. And the fact that they indicted him is not surprising at all.
And that important to note real quickly, sorry to interject, but that footage that came out was a blurry cell phone self-captured footage from somebody that was trying to sell it, to like TMZ. And so it was not the raw footage. The raw footage, which the NFL, correct me if I'm wrong, is probably already seen. The NFL's probably seen it. They probably requested it.
Yeah.
It seems like they've got that power, right? And that footage is going to be a whole lot clearer than the footage everybody thinks is the footage. Because people run their mouth about it. Tony saying, like, it's too blurry. He won't get indicted or convicted. It's too blurry. You can't even see him. That's Bob standing 5 feet away from a monitor at an angle with the glare on a Droid 3 that's recording it. And then it's blurry. It's not the original footage. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. That's a valid point. I don't pretend to know what the clearer digital video shows, but I would presume that it's essentially more or less comporting with the rough video that we saw. And I think that the evidence there was pretty clear that Mr. Kamara himself was involved in attacking this individual. We talked about this before, Smitty, that the NFL cannot just, close their eyes to one of its stars kicking a fan in the face. You just can't do that.
Especially when he's unconscious.
So the fact that he was indicted, doesn't surprise me at all. The fact that it was Clark County, obviously it's in Las Vegas, so that's not surprising. That means he's not going to have any sort of home field advantage, to use a football analogy. He's going to be on the road, as it were. Now, I have no idea who his counsel is. I haven't done any research on that. Given the fact that he's obviously got plenty of money, I'm sure that it's somebody local who is a good defense attorney. But the bottom line is, if you've got video of this guy kicking someone in the face, at a minimum, he's going to be trying to plead out. That's a best case scenario.
And a plea for people watching is a lot of people say he's going to settle. He can't settle. Settles in civil. Pleading is a form of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a form of admission to try and get out of a more severe outcome. So you're pleading when you're guilty. You're essentially saying, yeah, I did this. I'm pleading for a less. You're not pleading to skate out of it. And if he pleads, my understanding is the NFL will absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Tony? I think I might be on the wrong mic. Okay. The NFL will. Okay. The NFL will certainly.
I'm in my truck, just so you know.
Okay. The NFL will most certainly look at a plea as a form of admission of guilt, right?
Almost certainly. However, the short answer is yes, but, lawyers live in a different kind of world. There is a form of plea called nolo contendere, where you are essentially saying, I'm not going to admit or deny whether or not I committed the criminal act. I'm simply going to throw myself on the mercy of the court and say, do whatever you think is just. So he could enter a plea of nolo contendere, which is arguably not an admission.
Okay.
But from the NFL's perspective, they're still going to have the video. They're still going to have a guy who has been sentenced to some sort of criminal sanction, and they're not going to be able to ignore it. I think at this point, I don't even know if they can ignore it if he's found not guilty, which strikes me as, less than 1% chance.
And I don't know. So that's crazy. So you're saying you're less than 1% chance he will be found not guilty. Your total guess. We understand it's your guess, but you're saying less than 1%.
Well, let me throw it out this way. They've clearly indicted him on battery and conspiracy to commit battery. That's the stuff that's been reported. Usually, a good prosecutor will come up with every possible criminal claim that can be made. So I would not be surprised if there have been other criminal claims that were part of the indictment. I just don't know because I haven't had time to research it. Having said that, the firm where I started at, we did some federal criminal defense work. I personally didn't do it, but some of the guys did it. And one of them once told me that amongst federal prosecutors, there's an old saying, everybody's guilty. The only question is whether they've been properly charged. So as long as the charges comport with the evidence, the odds of him getting out of it after a full-blown indictment where there is video evidence which appears to show him physically making contact with a third party, the odds of him not being convicted of something are very, very low.
So let me ask you this. I don't know how much knowledge you have on this, or I'd like to just hear your opinion. But to my knowledge, the NFL can put this man on. Usually they wait. The NFL usually waits till the criminal part plays out before they take action. But the exemplis paid is the most likely scenario because, as you said, the NFL can't stand by. And if they are going to kind of try and be parallel with the decisions of the past to some degree, because like you've always said, I believe this was your phrase, the NFL is heavy-handed 1 minute and not heavy-handed the next minute. It seems likely that the commissioner exemplis paid is the best way to say this isn't a punishment. This is telling him to go handle it, come back when it's over. And if he's innocent, then nothing happened financially to him and he can get back to business. But he can't go onto the field on weekends and go into the courtroom during the week. I think that was another thing you had said in the past, I believe. And it's just not a good look what's your understanding of the exemplist option, and what do you think the NFL ends up doing?
Well, no, I think you're dead on. I think that the immediate response is probably exemplist paid because of the indictment. Now, I have to be very clear. I don't know what the criminal process is in Nevada with regard to speedy trial. In most states, it's usually within 90 days. But the defendant can choose to extend that. So I think as of today, we have to presume that there's going to be a trial, that the trial should happen by midsummer, and that he will either be convicted or found innocent, not guilty, probably by midsummer. The odds of him choosing to continue the trial date are low, because that's obviously not to his advantage.
Why is it not to his advantage?
Well, for his playing career.
But let's say that Kamara feels that he's got a short window anyway, and he wants to be on the field. There's that perspective too, because that's essentially what he did last year, is kept pushing it, kicking the can down the road. Part of me wonders if he wants to continue to do that versus try and get it out of the way, because the odds of him having a career after this, if he's indicted, are like zero. It's almost like, how much more time can I be on the field before they remove me from the field? That's kind of my thinking, but I could be wrong.
Well, I guess what I would say is that he has an opportunity to have a decision one way or the other, probably before training camp. Now, I don't know that. Again, I don't know the standard criminal procedure timelines in Nevada. But in most states, speedy trial requires trial within 90 days unless the defendant waives. Now, my point is, if he can get a decision, there is always the remote possibility that he's found guilty of some sort of a lesser charge. So, for example, they could find him not guilty of battery, but instead guilty of conspiracy to commit battery.
Okay.
Well, in that case, he's going to get a comparatively light sentence. And in that case, the NFL would then have some legal cover to effectively say, look, we're going to suspend him, but it doesn't have to be for a whole season.
Okay.
For example. So there is at least the possibility, with the proviso, again, that I don't know the details of Nevada law. There is at least the possibility that he could have a decision. The decision could be comparatively favorable. That decision could be made in time for the NFL to take its position. And, for example, he could be suspended for 4 games instead of a whole season.
Gotcha. I guess one other question.
And I would also throw out,
yeah,
comparatively, I mean, as a Browns fan, I almost can't help myself. We have to go back to what happened to Ben Roethlisberger.
Mm-hmm.
They had some really compelling evidence there. It turned out to not go criminal, but the NFL suspended him for, what was it, 2 games?
Yeah, it's tough to say what the NFL do here. Plus, Tony, when that footage was released, I went live at midnight when it broke. I literally went live 5 minutes after, and I'm thinking, we're ahead of everybody. No one else went live on this. No one had a video on it. I was the only one on YouTube doing it. Woke up the next morning, nothing. The next day, nothing. Nobody reported on it. Nobody even cared. And so, it's hard to know what kind of pressure the NFL is going to be under, because we don't know what kind of coverage it's going to get, because that shocked me. That all these, shows out there, media sources didn't even think it was worth, viewing. Like, it was crazy. And I know the footage was grainy and bad because, like I said, somebody recorded with a cell phone away from the monitor, and it was just a bad recording. But what are the odds in your this is a total guess, I understand. What are the odds do you think that the actual better, clearer version of this footage gets released in a more like solid amount of footage, like lengthwise? Do you think that there's a shot that happens because?
Yeah, of course. I think it boils down to what the NFL chooses it would prefer to have the outcome be. As we discussed back, I remember that night. I don't know if you remember. I called in, and I agree. I was a little bit surprised that it didn't get more media play. But at some level, the NFL was kind of holding back to wait and see where this thing went. I don't know exactly what the NFL wants to do with an Alvin Kamara situation. Who knows? It depends on the mood that Roger Goodell happens to be in. I don't know. If the sort of build up in the media is that, hey, Kamara was a bit player in all of this, that the victim sort of started the altercation for whatever reason. Who knows? Maybe the NFL says, look, we're not going to turn Alvin Kamara into some sort of an example. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if the PR position is negative, well, then sure, I would bet they would disclose or make that video public instantly. It depends on how they want to defend themselves. The NFL is all about the NFL.
Yeah.
They're not about Alvin Kamara.
And Tony, hold on. I got the script right here. I'm going to look at it and see if Alvin Kamara gets convicted. According to the script, he misses the entire season. I got the script right here. It's all scripted. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah, you know how everybody says it's scripted? The whole NFL's rigged.
Yeah. Well.
It's the whole. The whole narrative right now.
I know.
Hey, so my last question, Tony, and first of all, everyone loves when you call in, man. The whole chat is like, Tony's the man, Tony to the moon. You need to call in on a regular basis. The phone line's always open. Save this number and just dial in when you're driving home, whenever you're going somewhere, just dial in and we'll talk about whatever you want, Tony. Everyone loves when you call in.
That's very kind, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah, what I was going to say last is, okay, so Alvin Kamara, let's say... It's so hard to predict what the NFL is going to do because, like you said, heavy hand, light hand. It's so inconsistent. But let's say that nothing more comes of anything. Okay, what are the odds in your projected, expert opinion, just your opinion? What are the odds the NFL does something before the season begins? If let's say this trial goes into the season. Okay, because that's kind of what I expect him to try and do. But like you said, he might want to get it over with just because he thinks he can get out of it. Or his attorney says, "Look, we're gonna get this down to the smaller charge, like you said, or the smaller conviction." Yeah. But if let's say it dips into the season and there's no answer yet, right? We don't have an answer. Is he playing until?
No.
You think the NFL steps in and says paid leave? That's kind of what I've been saying. Paid leave.
Yeah,
go work it out.
That's kind of why I lean toward a good attorney, a good criminal defense attorney, is going to push very hard to see if there's a reasonable plea that can be found here. Now, that may involve some unpleasantries for Mr. Kamara, such as testifying against his friends, who were also involved in the altercation. But a good defense attorney would find a reasonable plea, get him out of there as quickly as possible, and then go on bent knee to the NFL and say, look, this guy started it. I understand I shouldn't have done it. I understand that you have to take some sort of action. And if the NFL is trying to be reasonable, they give him a 4-game suspension and he misses the first 4 games.
That would be a win for Kamara.
I think it would too, but that's just one possible scenario. Right. I cannot say definitively. I'm telling you my gut instinct as to what I think is. I think he ends up getting anywhere from 2 to 6 games, and I think it gets done before the season starts. Okay,
I appreciate that take. That's kind of the takeaway here. I think most people want to know what to expect. So 2 to 6 games at the beginning of the year, maybe comes back. Tony, my last question, and I'll let you go because I know you're a busy guy. What is the percentage chance these things get worse for him and he could face something like prison time, like for the assault? Is there any sort of scenario you could see that happening, or because he's such a big name that's not happening? Or is there like, hey, if there's footage that we don't even see where there's clear, guys unconscious, they continue to kick him, there's more footage of it. Is there a possibility of something more severe happening?
Officially, just in case any of my fellow local attorneys are listening, who the hell knows? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Unofficially, just between me and you, I doubt it. Not because he's a big name, But because the facts in this case are somewhat complicated, and what I mean is separating out the criminal liability. Who's really the bad guy here? Was Alvin Kamara really individually the bad guy in this altercation? I doubt it. Now, one of the people working for him may have been. Let's not forget, the quote-unquote victim may have started this. I don't know that. I don't pretend to know.
Yeah.
But the point is, this is not as if Alvin Kamara walked up to an old lady crossing the street
True.
at noon on a Tuesday and hit her in the back of the head with a baseball bat.
True. I mean, you make a good point in like a reality check of the severity of it at the end of the day. Like what I've heard, and I again don't know exactly what happened. I wasn't there. I haven't seen the full footage. This is what reports have suggested. So this is all hearsay. But the word is that this guy was yapping away, I'm sure saying some of the most belligerent things to Alvin Kamara at a casino. I imagine that he was probably, sipping back on a few. Total guess on my part. Yep. But this guy was yapping away and probably saying awful things to Kamara. Probably a fan of another team.
Probably.
And so Kamara reportedly put his hand on his chest to push him out of the elevator or prevent him from coming in the elevator. Like, take the next one, buddy. Guy slaps his hand off his, chest to say, "Don't touch me." And that slap initiated the jumping of the dude. So, like, to your point,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, to your point, you could argue good guy, bad guy, all that stuff, and I think you're probably right. I don't think there's any sort of prison time or anything like that awaiting him because, like you said, it wasn't some planned, I'm going to go attack this person or do something premeditated. It was a brawl that got out of hand. And back in the day, you could do this stuff. You could sock someone and it would be okay. But in today's world, it's different. Tony, appreciate you coming on here. And Tony's prediction, again, just a total guess, 2 to 6 game suspension at the beginning of the year, and that this thing's resolved before the season starts later in the summer. A very good guess. I believe you're probably the most accurate prediction so far that I've heard. So I think that's probably going to be the most likely. Maybe mine's 6 to 8 games, but he could be out the entire season too. If he, in my opinion, if he drags this thing out, and let's say he drags this out and the court case can't complete until later on in the year, I think the NFL has to put him on paid leave and wait. So to your point earlier, it's to his advantage to get it done early because the NFL will be forced to say, until it's solved, you're on paid leave, bro. And then he's like, that was a misstep on my part. I could have got it out of the way, got the 6 to 8 games, the 2 to 6 games or whatever.
Yep. A good defense attorney would have already picked up the phone and started talking about a plea.
Yeah, which is an admission of guilt to a degree, right? So it's going to result.
Yeah, but it depends on exactly what he pleads to.
Right.
If he pleads to conspiracy, that the elements of that do not necessarily include physical contact.
Now, how much of this can tie to financial restitution? Like, we know that the civil is for monetary, but in terms of medical and costs involved of this guy's recovery, is that something that would make the individual, the alleged victim, say, like, okay, like I am advising because I'm advising that I would be okay with this plea, this lesser plea of conspiracy, which would be no physical harm if you pay my medical bills above this amount and give me more for suffering. And then the civil is a whole different case.
Right. It's a variable that can play a part. We don't know that at this moment, but yes, it can be a relevant variable.
Okay.
Yep.
Tony, appreciate you, my guy.
Forgive me, buddy. I got to get going.
Yeah. Tony, anytime, call in.
Good to talk to you, brother.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, man. Be good.
Yep. What a boss. Tony is the man.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.